Hello, everybody. Today we have the amazing honor of welcoming Elizabeth Wright onto the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour. Elizabeth was born in Sydney, Australia, with a birth defect called congenital limb deficiency, meaning she is missing half her right arm, half her right leg, and a missing finger on her left hand, with two fingers fused together. At the age of 13, Elizabeth decided she wanted to swim at the Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games. With determination and focus, she started her swimming career, resulting in her achieving her Paralympic dreams, having competed at the 1996 Atlanta Paralympic Games and the 2000 Sydney Paralympic Games. All in all, she walked away with 3 Paralympic medals, 2 bronze and a silver. After retiring from swimming, Elizabeth embarked on her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at the University of Newcastle, Australia, with a particular focus on the visual representation of the disabled woman's body. Finishing at the top of her class, she was then offered to do a PhD program at the same school. While studying, Elizabeth went on exchange to Leeds University, a place where she fell in love and lives currently. Without further ado, let's listen in on my conversation with Elizabeth. Welcome to the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour, Liz.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I've done quite a few podcasts over the past few weeks, but this is definitely a different one to what I've done, talking about environmentalism and sustainability and all that stuff. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I know you've written a couple some articles about it, and I know you're very aware of the issue, and so that's why we wanted to have you on the show. It should be nice. I'm sure you'll have a lot of information for us to learn from.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I'm no expert by any means, but definitely it's something I'm really interested and passionate about, and I think something definitely in terms of disability that needs to be discussed.
My co-host Jean Mishner is actually in Melbourne, Australia. I know you
Oh,
were
wow.
born in Sydney, right?
Yeah, I was born in Sydney, but Jean, how's it going in Victoria? Because you're all shut down again, aren't you?
Yep, we're in the naughty corner.
Yeah.
We've been left out. We're the butt of every joke around Australia. It hasn't been a good couple of weeks.
No, I can imagine. My dad lives just north of Sydney, and he's really worried that New South Wales is going to be locked down again. So, and I'm like, good. If it means that you don't get coronavirus, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, tell them to join the club.
Yeah.
Fun.
Our first question for you is, so I know you were born with a congenital impairment, right, in your right arm and leg. So do you mind just further for our viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with you, just elaborating on the extent of your disability and how it's affected your day-to-day life?
Yeah, sure. I was born with a range of different genetic impairments, which in terms of medical terms, they just pull it all under the terminology of congenital limb deficiency. But I prefer to use the term limb different. So I see myself as I'm limb different, and that's the way that I talk about my disability. Essentially what that means is I was born with half my right arm missing and half my right leg missing. So I wear a prosthetic leg to be able to get around and have mobility. And when I was younger, I did try a prosthetic arm and I rejected it outright. I really, really hated it. And I felt like I could always do more, even as a child, that I could do more without the prosthetic arm. So that kind of didn't work for me. And also on my left hand, I'm missing a finger, and my thumb and one of my fingers is joined together. So for me, I think being born with my disability, it's just something, it's my normal, it's my just day-to-day life. And it's interesting because I do a lot of speaking in schools, and one of the most common questions I get asked by children is what's it like to be disabled? And I actually say to them, I don't know, because this is my normal. This is just as your body is normal for you, this is normal for me. And in terms of day-to-day life, I think since childhood, I've been an avid problem solver. And I think that will be the case for a lot of people with disabilities. You become really, really good at problem solving because it's something that we have to do every single day of our lives, is kind of looking around, right, how can I achieve this? How can I do this? How can I modify this? How can I get over there or get to that space? Or so it's something that, you know, on a day-to-day basis, I definitely face certain barriers, which I definitely have to think about how can I actually achieve this or do this. And I certainly subscribe to the social model of disability, and I don't see it so much as it's an issue within my body that I have to fix, but that, you know, if we actually remove some of these barriers, then my day-to-day life would be a lot easier, as it would be for a lot of disabled people.
Yeah, exactly. I totally understand where, you know, when you live in a world that's created only mainly for a specific kind of uh person or vantage points, there are going to be obstacles. I know for me, when I'm wheeling around in my wheelchair, I grew up in a state that rains a lot, in Oregon on the west coast
Okay, yeah.
of the United States. And so I've learned to tuck an umbrella under my shirt and straddle it with, you know, lots of clothes. But that's kind of hard to do in the summertime.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
or my dad's built like a storage shelf underneath my wheelchair so that I could put my backpack and my books and purse and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah.
That's
So
brilliant.
or like anyways, different things. So I certainly
Yeah.
understand how when you're forced to be more innovative, you do
Yeah.
try to get by the best that you can. I know that you've come up with a number of different ways to be creative and help you with your day-to-day life.
It seems like you have a good take on, you know, how you perceive your life as opposed to how others do. But have you ever come across some maybe odd or particularly challenging questions and maybe turned it around and had a bit of fun with, you know, with your reaction?
I think there's always going to be a pattern there of kind of getting really strange questions and kind of strange responses to your body and how you kind of interact with the world. And I think at different ages, it's definitely the way that I respond has changed a lot. So, you know, as a teenager, I think, you know, when you're a teenager and you're very self-conscious anyway, and then you add the layer of disability on top, and you're so self-conscious about how you look and the way people respond. And you know, I still get stared at these days, but when I was a teenager, being stared at when I'd be, you know, out at the shops or whatever was so frustrating and embarrassing. And I kind of went through this really angry phase where I'd angrily stare back at people like, you know, with wide eyes and kind of be like, really aggressive look on my face. And they get really embarrassed and look away. But I think kind of as I've gotten older, I kind of, it's almost like I think I'm bemused by certain things. I just find it funny, and I'm not afraid to push back at people anymore and kind of say, why would you say that? Or why would you suggest that? Or whatnot. I mean,
Yeah, that'd be good for maybe some of our younger audience members who can relate to that and maybe feel like, you know, you don't have to always feel that way. You know, it may change as, you know, as you get older and get asked questions, you know, as
yeah,
you go. And you know, you can control your own response and your own perception of what's going on, just because it might be exactly the same question but just at a different age, and it's
yeah.
your choice on how to respond, right, and how to feel about it. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I said, kind of especially for younger people, you've got all these pressures through especially these days. I'm so glad I'm not a teenager these days. Look, I'll be really honest with you, like with social media and everything that goes on, and the pressure that so many young people have around body image and stuff like that, and adding that extra layer of disability it can be really difficult. And And I think it is just that knowing that, you know, it's not always going to be that tough, because it's not, it's really not, you know, life, you know, will change and evolve as you grow and change and evolve. And hopefully, you know, as we kind of move forward, you know, into kind of a space which is more, you know, in terms of community and society, which is more diverse and inclusive, hopefully, you know, in general, life will become a lot less kind of pressure filled and difficult and filled with barriers for people. And I mean, that's the dream, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly relate on a lot of the points. I've gotten some pretty interesting reactions as well. I think the most common ones are, "What's wrong with you?" And then random men coming up to me and putting their hand on my legs and saying,
Oh,
"God will cure you. God has a plan for you."
oh no.
And
But you know what? You can have fun with that. One of my best friends has spina bifida, and she's in a wheelchair. And you know, when you've gone out for a night on the town, and she you know, can get out of her wheelchair when there's small steps or something, and kind of drag her chair down. And you know, when she's done that around a whole bunch of drunk people, it's like the amount of times we've had like, "It's a miracle, you can walk, it's amazing," and it's just like, okay, well, we're just gonna laugh at that and kind of go, okay, fair enough that that's gonna happen.
yeah, exactly. So the next question, I wanted you to further elaborate on something you wrote a while ago. So you wrote that disability is my identity, the able-bodied world is my reality, and there's an uncomfortable disconnect between them that has to be addressed if we are ever going to get disability fully included and accepted in this world. So what did you mean by this exactly?
For me, I think, you know, especially in recent years, I've been really thinking very much about the way that I was raised. And I was the only child with a physical disability in my family. And my parents, very rightly so, you know, they're definitely role models for me in terms of activism and the way that they fought for me to be included. But at the same time, when I look back, I definitely see this kind of strange disconnect between my experience and understanding of reality and kind of the people that I was around, especially growing up, and kind of seeing how that is reflected as an adult. So, you know, I kind of say to people that I grew up able-bodied in the sense that my family was all able-bodied. My parents fought to get me into mainstream schooling, and I wasn't aware of this fight when I was a child. They obviously didn't let me know. I was like 4 or 5 years old. I just went to school like every other child, and I made friends, and all my friends were non-disabled. And you know, I went to brownies and guides and did kind of sports and things like that. And basically, it was like around representation. I was not seeing anyone else who looked even remotely like me, or who could have had in any way a similar lived experience to what I was having. So I kind of grew up and with this internalized ableism in a sense, and it's not until now as an adult that I'm kind of looking back and seeing this. And with this internalized ableism, I think that is the friction that I was kind of talking about in that article, that my lived experience is as someone with limb difference, and because of the way the world has been structured, it's been structured and made for non-disabled people. So for me, it's like my lived experience is, well, how do I fit in with that? But for able-bodied or non-disabled people, they don't have any understanding of that. So for them, when they're in that social structure, they cannot see where the issues are. But because I've got a kind of coming then back to this internalized ableism, it's almost like because I've been around so many non-disabled people and I grew up in that non-disabled environment, I felt like for a very long time that I haven't known how to express that. And I think that can be a lot for, or that's similar for a lot of disabled people. You don't know how to express that kind of disconnect between your lived experience that you know that a majority of your acquaintances are not going to understand in any way. And I think for me, when I started training for the Paralympics in my teen years, and I started traveling with the Paralympic team and making friends with other kids with physical disabilities, it was almost like this revelation of, wow, okay, I am actually different, but here is my community, and these are people that will understand that. But that is not a constant thing. And to me, that is that disconnect. Non-disabled people have other non-disabled people every day in their life that has not necessarily a similar lived experience, because there's obviously layers of discrimination and oppression, and you've got kind of racism and sexism and classism and all those stuff. So I'm not saying that all non-disabled people have the same lived experience, but in terms of disability and being non-disabled, they have that experience. So I can't really connect to other people on a daily basis in that way, which I can when I speak to other disabled people that get it. And to me, is that disconnect, and it's that disconnect we have to bridge if we're ever going to be fully inclusive. And by that means, I think essentially getting more representation of disability in the media, in movies. I think recently you may be aware of the kind of uproar, especially on disability Twitter, about the movie coming out, Come As You Are, where which is about the three disabled men that are going to the brothel to lose their virginity, but the actors who play these three men are not disabled in any way. And it's like, for a lot of, you read the reviews and stuff by non-disabled reviewers, and they don't see an issue with that. But the disability community does see an issue with that, because it's like there are disabled actors out there. And it's all of these little examples of this disconnect that I just see all over the place. And it's like, it's never going to kind of go away if we don't kind of increase that representation, raise that awareness, educate and show non-disabled people that this is what disability is, this is what disability is like, and really confront those stereotypes that are out there. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think as individuals with disabilities, our environments for the most part are not with people that look like us.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, I know, especially if you're in a space like the Paralympics or a camp that is for individuals with disabilities, then you'll be surrounded with more in that community, and you'll see people that have more similar experiences as you. But for the most part, for me at least, and I know for a lot of other individuals with disabilities I know as well, their environments are mainly with able-bodied people or perhaps people with invisible disabilities. And I know when I first went to my sports camp, because I did wheelchair racing. And
oh wow, awesome.
Yeah, I did wheelchair racing for about 7 years. And I remember when I went to that first camp in Eugene, Oregon, where I'm from, where I went to college as well, I was just like, I felt very foreign inside, because there was all these people with all sorts of different disabilities. And I had never been in a room with so many individuals with disabilities before. And so it's just a different feeling, and
it is.
you have to kind of get adjusted to that.
You do. I think especially when, for me, up until 13, 14, when I joined the Paralympic team, it's all of my friends, all my social life, everything was non-disabled. They were non-disabled people. And it can be quite jarring when you suddenly put into this space where you're like, well, I belong to this community, but I've never been in this community before. And that is that, again, that strange gap, that strange disconnect that can happen for people. And I think it's reconciling all of these spaces together that will help with inclusion and accessibility and that understanding kind of across the disability and non-disabled kind of barrier that is kind of the issue there.
Yeah, so I think it's not only the able-bodied community that has to learn and adapt, but rather that be physical infrastructure wise or psychologically and internally. It's also people with disabilities too,
Yeah, oh, I totally agree. It's one thing that the past few weeks I've been doing a lot of work around allyship. So a lot of the work that I do is around teaching non-disabled people how to be better disability allies. Yet at the same time, I quite often say to them, I'm working constantly on a day-to-day basis to be a better disability ally, because I can only understand disability from my perspective. I can't speak up for what it's like to be a wheelchair user, or to be deaf, or to have a visual impairment, or to be autistic, or I cannot speak to that experience because I've never had that. So I think it's got to be constant work on our own part as well to be better allies within our own community as well, definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, one thing that comes to mind, perhaps we're going a little too what's the word? Anyways, one thing I think of is like, I think a lot of able-bodied people think, when it comes to certain tricky things like um uh like starting a family or dating or not, all the awkward things. The thing is, able-bodied people, they have all these media platforms and all the information out there that show them how it's done in movies, in I don't know, other online platforms I will not name here. And then, but like for people with disabilities, like there aren't that information. You kind of like, you just like figure it out yourself, and it's just as awkward and just as daunting as it is for an able-bodied person, I would say, to figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, and I think that's where representation has to kind of come into it. And growing up, I all my favorite shows, I don't remember seeing one disabled character in any way, shape, or form. And I think growing up, you still had these role models that were non-disabled, that were showing you, well, this is what dating's like as a teenager, or this is what your first kiss should be like, and da 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 da. And it's like you kind of watch that, and I think this is again another disconnect, when I'm talking about those disconnects and those frictions, is as a teenager growing up in a very non-disabled, able-bodied kind of community, and you believe that, well, I'm going to have those same experiences, without actually clocking or understanding why you might not be having those same experiences as your friends are, because you're like, well, I'm just like you, I'm just like my non-disabled friend, when it's in actual fact, yes, I am just like them, but I have this layer of disability, or this lens of disability that I'm going to see life through, and that I can't avoid the fact that people are going to see my disability and respond the way that they're going to respond. I can't avoid that in any way, shape, or form. And it's how I kind of take that positioning and aim to still have those same experiences that other people have, and that maybe you kind of really want to have yourself as well.
Yeah, I think before we go on too many tangents, I think we could do the interview just on that itself. Anyway, so moving on.
This is about children. So I know that you used to work in schools all over the country with the aim to inspire and motivate children to thrive and succeed. So what is the correct way to communicate with children about disability?
This is almost like one of the most common questions that I get. I get it a lot from parents, actually, is, well, how do I talk about disability with my child? And I think for me, the biggest thing is to not be scared of it. Once you put that layer of fear around disability into a child's mind, it starts to frame it within this idea of shame. that it's actually shameful to be disabled and shameful to talk about disability, and something that we should hide from. Again, another probably common experience across the board for disabled people is you're out and about and you hear a child go, "Mummy, mummy," or "Daddy, daddy, what's wrong with that lady's arm?" Or "Why is that person in a wheelchair?" Or "Why?" You hear these questions, and the amount of times a parent will shush them and drag them away. And I'm like, for me, that is a trigger for that child to go, "Oh, wow, okay, this is something to be embarrassed about or to be ashamed of. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore." So, when I'm out and about, if a child asks, what's wrong with that lady's arm, or what happened to that lady's leg, or, I'll go up to them. I'll just turn around. I don't care what I'm doing. I'll turn around and walk straight up to that child and the parent before that parent can drag them off. And I'll get down to that child's level and I'll say to them, "Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me about my arm or my leg?" And the parent will usually be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "It's fine. It's fine. I want to have the, if you're okay with me having this discussion with your child, I will have this discussion with your child." And quite often with children, they just want to know, "Oh, well, what happened? Why are you like that?" And, you explain it. And then they're like, "Oh, okay." And then off they go to play or go to the chocolate counter or whatever, they're just going to get on with their day. For them, it's just a curiosity thing. They're like, "Oh, there's someone who looks different to me and I want to understand why they look different to me." And that's nothing to be ashamed of. And that is the approach I take into schools. I go into schools, whether it be primary or secondary school.
I like that approach you take with the inquisitive child. Like, that's the perfect time to speak to them, right? Their mind is open, they're curious, they've just asked the question. That's when they're going to learn, right?
Exactly. And we can't stop that. You know what, if we start putting shame or fear around certain topics, then of course as they grow up they're just going to perpetuate these kind of beliefs and stuff around disability. It's like, no, we teach them that it's okay. Disability is nothing to be scared about. So
Wonderful.
Yeah. So we're gonna jump to a different topic altogether, although a big topic though. So we're gonna jump to climate change and environmental issues, which I know you've written about. And if you don't feel like you have huge expertise, feel free to just give your opinion. I know it's very invaluable, especially since not enough individuals with disabilities, are giving their feedback and participating in the realm, especially with climate change, which has become a huge issue in our today's world, and is a major conversation every country is having and having to grapple with, some sooner than others. So my first question is, how can, just following up from what I just said, how can we get more individuals with disabilities interested in helping to combat climate change, especially in, global north countries?
I think definitely as a disability, and this for me comes back to allyship, I kind of tend to run full ball into everything to do with environment and climate change, and trying to do the best that I can as an individual, as well as trying to understand the wider impact of kind of this kind of capitalist world that, especially in the West, like, extreme capitalist countries that we kind of live in, the impact that is having on a much broader scale than we on an individual level do. And I think for me, as someone with a disability who's trying the best I can, I've just kept on trying things. And I think the issues that I found in terms of a disabled person, and this is definitely, I'm definitely on a journey myself with this, is this understanding that just because I'm finding a particular way of contributing to reducing my carbon footprint or whatever that may be, doesn't mean that for the next disabled person it's going to be as easy as that. And I think for me, case in point, when kind of the discovery about the amount of plastics that were in the ocean and stuff like that, I'll admit this was probably the first time that I got pushback from the disability community when I started tweeting about like, oh, look, I've got a metal straw. Look how like environmentally friendly I am. And then a few of my friends really pushed back and said, do you realize that by getting rid of plastic straws, this means that when I go out for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or any kind of drink, that I'm actually not going to be able to drink that drink, because especially if it's a hot drink, I can't use a metal straw because that's going to heat up because of the hot drink. I need a plastic straw to be able to drink. And it was like, oh, like here I am thinking I'm being like this big responsible kind of environmentalist in a way, and I was completely missing a bigger picture from my own community. And so that's why, in recent years, when it comes to kind of addressing and looking at climate change and sustainability and environmentalism, I'm still happy to look at solutions that are out there and trying them for myself, but I also look at them and look at where the challenges are going to be in terms of accessibility and inclusion for all disabled people, because guaranteed there's going to be loads of disabled people out there that want to contribute in some way to ensuring that climate change doesn't happen, because as a lot of scientists and researchers in that state, disabled people are the most disproportionately affected community of climate change. We are the ones that are going to be affected probably the most quickly, and kind of in worst case scenario situations. So it's something that we should be aware of and working towards. But I think it's just being very aware that a lot of the solutions that are being presented are not accessible in any way, shape or form, and that's where you get problems. And I'm starting to see that more and more, even for myself, in light of, especially with the pandemic and COVID and lockdown, and a lot of cities talking about redesigning their city centres to be more pedestrianised and cycle friendly. Well, I immediately, that affects me as well. And, in terms of accessibility, that affects, millions of people. Because for me, I can't walk miles and miles and miles. So if I get to the outside of the pedestrian zone, but I've got to get to the other side, which is 5 miles away, I'm not going to be able to do that. The same thing, I cannot physically ride a bike. I've tried, trust me. I've even tried, trikes and stuff like that. I've tried modified bikes, but because of the nature of my disability, I just end up tipping off that bike. I cannot ride a bike. So, even putting in more cycle lanes is not going to benefit me or make a city centre more accessible for me, let alone many other disabled people out there. So I think there's a lot of issues, especially around design, that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, which is if you don't participate, your voice isn't going to be included, in your perspective isn't going to be included. Like plastic straws, banning them isn't a problem for me, and I'm a person with a disability, and it isn't a problem for you, and you're a person with a disability. And so I think with the overwhelming variety of disabilities out there, if people want their perspective and their voices heard, then they really need to participate and be part of a solution that works for them. Otherwise, there's going to be a solution, but it's only going to work for people that voice their opinions and they're active and participate. Just like in the U.S., our democracy, it's a lot of older people that vote, and so we have Social Security and Medicare and all that, and those programs are relatively strong because older people vote, and younger people don't, and people with disabilities a lot of times don't, and so those programs are not as strong, and not enough, as much attention are paid to those things. And so,
Absolutely. And I think that's why, like, the stuff that the work that you guys are doing around the podcast and videos and stuff like that, stuff that, kind of I've been doing in terms of developing online publications for women. It's for disabled women, it's about creating those platforms where we can really empower and enable, I think, people from really across the breadth and depth of our community to actually have their voice heard. I think that is becoming more and more and more important as we kind of go forward into kind of the impacts, especially around climate change and stuff like that.
yeah, I think exactly. And I think, being aware and environmentally conscious is slightly different for everybody. For me and you, perhaps it is stop using plastic straws. That doesn't mean that we're gonna frown upon people who do really need it and will use it, and they can be environmentally friendly in another way altogether. So I wanted to ask you a question about preparing for disasters. Speaking of the things to come, so how can we better include people with disabilities in natural disaster planning? I know in Australia, you guys had the wildfires, and I know in a lot of countries they're having droughts and they're having floods and things like that. And obviously there are individuals with disabilities in those environments. And it's especially tragic when it's in countries in the global south when there are no resources to evacuate.
I think I think it has to be a similar approach to say what you're doing with inclusion and accessibility in the corporate world, in organizations, in education, stuff like that, which unfortunately not a lot of people do go this route. But recently I've had a contract to support an organization restructure around kind of their 4 pillars that they're looking at, including disability as one of them, and it's looking at that structural change. And I think it's when it comes to national disasters and things like that, and the organizations and groups that are actually there to manage and protect people, it's about obviously before the natural disaster actually happens, is about having that consultation, not necessarily with non-disabled people who may claim to be disability consultants and understand the disabled experience, but actually get disability consultants who are disabled to come into the organisation, discuss, plan, so that they're actually getting a fuller picture of what is needed for disabled people to feel protected, to have those plans and those options on what to do when or if a disaster like natural disaster does happen. So in Australia, definitely I was there at Christmas time when all the bushfires were happening, and it was like, okay, well, what plans do disabled people have in that situation if they're in a village or a town that's having a fire bearing down on them? What plan can they have and communication can they have with their local services that is going to help them make the correct decision for them to either leave their premises or get to safety? And even then, because I think there were some issues in Australia, and I know there's been some issues in the States as well about kind of taking disabled people to safe shelters, but then they might not be the equipment there for them to be supported in any way. So it's like, okay, well, how do we prepare those spaces so that they are accessible, so that people who are on ventilators or something like that can have, uninterrupted access to power, kind of access to disabled toilets, perhaps, safe spaces for sleep and eating and support and stuff like that. And so I think it's definitely got to be that working with disabled people before the disaster happens.
And requiring a lot of planning beforehand.
We experienced a bit of a crazy evacuation by the Navy of a beachside community, Malakuta.
Yeah, I remember that.
Had people and horses in the sea waiting to be evacuated by the Navy.
Yeah,
So that
I remember that, and I'm pretty sure that was one of the issues I was thinking of, where there was actually a lot of talk and a lot of upset because there was talk about not evacuating disabled people who were stuck on the beach and that immediately. And it was basically seen like, if you can walk up that ladder, then you can be evacuated. If you can't, then you won't be. And it's like, well, why should disabled people not, why can you not have plans in place before that actually happens to actually cater for disabled people who probably don't want to stay in a smoke-filled beach worrying about their life? So yeah, definitely issues like that.
So, what questions would you have for leading environmentalists in the world on including people with disabilities in climate change discussions?
I think, I think it comes down to very similar inclusion and diversity practice that so many people do. And it's like, if you're going to have a team or a panel or a conference or something like that, it's about ensuring that you actually include disabled people in those conversations. So it's just that awareness of when you're looking for speakers, when you're looking for leaders, when you're looking for perhaps people that live within those communities. It's making sure that you are including a number of people with different types of disabilities so that their perspective is being seen and understood. Because and I will say this, I think it's absolutely brilliant that people like Greta Thunberg, who does have Asperger's, she's on the spectrum, and I think she's a wonderful role model to show that people with disability can be passionate about climate change and the environment, and they should be allowed to have a say, and they can actually be leaders in this space. And so I think it's just, what I would suggest is no matter who you are, like I said, if it's a team, if you're a group of designers, make sure that you're talking to disabled people. To all those city planners out there who thought of the brilliant idea of let's pedestrianize city centres, go out there and talk to a wide range of disabled people first before you start kind of ripping roads up and putting in more sidewalks and stuff like that. Really talk to them and work with them to figure out what is going to be the best solution. Because, as I said earlier, a lot of disabled people are probably passionate environmentalists out there. We want, I know I certainly want to participate and ensure that I'm leaving behind a better world than I will leave it. And very much a big part of that is climate change and the environment. So you have to include the disabled person's voice. It has to be there, no matter what stage you're at, team, conference, panel, whatever, it has to be included.
Definitely. And not like what you said before, because also you are very, very good and passionate at problem solving.
Exactly. We are the best problem solvers in the world. And like I quite often tell recruiters and employers, I say, you want someone who's really, really amazing at problem solving, hire a disabled person, because they will think outside the box and they will solve your issues. And I think exactly, it's just about clever design and clever problem solving, and who better to support and designers doing that but disabled people. Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah, very well said. I think we've emphasized this numerous times during the interview, right? Just include as many perspectives as possible, because regardless of who we are, we all have blind spots, and we all have perspectives that we don't know and we don't live. Even me, as a person who uses a wheelchair, has a physical disability, even though because of that, perhaps I am more sensitive to people's certain difficulties. And so even then, I have certain privileges that I don't even know of, and that other people may not have. And so just making sure that voices are heard, and in order to get your voices heard, you have to be at the table. You have to be willing to share your thoughts out loud to the world. And you've been willing to do that during this podcast and many other platforms. So thank you so much, Liz. It's been wonderful learning from you.
Thank you, Ming. Thank you, Jean, so much. I've had so much fun. It's been great to chat with you both.
really discussed a lot today. We covered a lot of ground and learned a lot of new things. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean.
Did you like this video? If so, share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, trapesandglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Trapes and Global on Wheels podcast hour.